Hello and welcome to Arirang TV's continuing coverage of COVID-19. I'm Min Son-hee. Amid the backdrop of rising new infections here in Seoul and its surrounding regions, North Korea on Tuesday blew up an inter-Korean liaison office that was set up in 2018 in its border town of Kaesong. In our studio discussion today, we explore the impact of this latest act of provocation and COVID-19 on South Korea's economy. But first, here are the headlines with our Kwon So-ah and our Noara.
Hi.
Hello. So let's start with the domestic updates. I understand we have a slight spike in cases today.
Yes, figures rose to the 40s with most infections in the metropolitan area, but also some sporadic cases in the central of the country and also in the southern region, and a dozen imported cases as well. So for a closer look, we have 43 additional cases. That brings the total to 12,198 here in the country. And out of the 43, 12 were cases from abroad. And one more person died from the condition, and 28 additional people have been quarantined, and 14 people are now out of the hospitals, bringing the total of recovered people to 10,774. Now, throughout this week and month, we've had cases in the double digits. New infections dropped to the 30s early this week, but today we have a rise by 9 from yesterday. And amid this trend, the government is preparing the metropolitan area in case of massive outbreaks, such as the one in Daegu and Gyeongsang-buk-do province earlier in the year. They made that announcement earlier at a briefing this morning that they are preparing the capital region for such a scenario. Also, inspections are being carried out on marketing and door-to-door sales firms, as activities there have resulted in a huge cluster infection responsible for more than 170 COVID-19 cases as of Tuesday. Some 8,000 companies have been checked through Tuesday, and actions are being carried out on 27 firms that have violated quarantine measures or were found to be unregistered businesses.
So Jeju-do, Korea's southernmost resort island, has shifted to everyday quarantine measures, I hear.
Yes, the popular tourist destination had extended its social distancing campaign for another 2 weeks. That's later than the majority of the country due to COVID-19 patients who had traveled to the island. Now, beginning Thursday, 35 public facilities and activity venues will tentatively reopen, including museums, art galleries, libraries, and concert halls, among many others. Now, visitors to most of these venues will have to pre-register online and also wear masks and get their body temperatures checked before entering.
And what is the situation looking like overseas?
Well, cases are spiking. We had 142,557 new cases registered on Tuesday, and that is much more than the 124,600 the day before. So let's take a look at our graph here. Now, we have over 8.25 million cases as of 12 p.m. Korea time. And if we go over to the countries with major outbreaks here, more than 2.2 million infections have been reported in the U.S. with over 119,000 fatalities. Brazil is forecast to become the second country in the world to exceed the 1 million mark in total cases. And Russia's latest figure stands at more than 545,000 with over 7,200 deaths. Let's move over to other regions. A concern here is Chile. We will talk about Chile later on, but Chile's figure is expected to be much larger than the 184,000 we are seeing right here, and I will talk about that now.
I see, but first tell us a bit more about Beijing, where the situation is looking quite grave, So.
Yes, Beijing, which fears that its latest cluster infection from a wholesale market could lead to a worse situation, has raised its COVID-19 emergency response to level 3, from level 3 to level 2, that is. The city's government made that announcement late Tuesday, ordering all primary and secondary schools to close and conduct online classes beginning this Wednesday. Also, under this emergency level, there will be time limits for access to public facilities such as libraries, museums, and parks. Many shuttle bus services will be suspended with a ban of inter-province group travel, and outsiders and cars are to be banned from entering areas with mid to high infection risks. Now, let's talk about Chile. Health officials said 31,000 coronavirus cases were omitted from official figures due to errors, and they were traced back to mid-March due to delays in the counting process. The country's health ministry said it will add those to the accumulated figures on a Wednesday. Chile has the third highest number of cases in Latin America.
All right, so thank you for that for now. I'll come back to you for more on the domestic updates after the regular briefing.
All right.
Meanwhile, Aram, imported cases are raising concerns among health officials again.
That's right. Although many of the new cases, as we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks, are concentrated in the capital region, imported cases have been on a steady rise. Now, infections from overseas reached nearly 100 during the first half of this month, and health officials are especially concerned over cases rebounding in other regions outside Korea, such as the Chinese capital of Beijing, as we've been hearing. Now, that would increase the likelihood of the virus coming into Korea as well. Now, although there haven't been any cases imported from China recently, officials are still on alert as the country is, of course, geographically close to Korea, and there are many business exchanges between the two countries as well, so that is causing concern. Now, imported cases, especially from the Middle East and Southwest Asia, such as India and Pakistan, have been rising over the past few weeks. However, those from the Americas and Europe have been dropping slightly, so there's some good news there.
Right, Aram, British scientists have found a cheap and widely available drug that can help critically ill COVID-19 patients. And this is also gaining some praise.
That's right. The WHO hailed the discovery as a life-saving scientific breakthrough. We are talking about the steroid dexamethasone, and researchers from Oxford University found that it reduced deaths in seriously ill patients by 35%, so just over a third. Now, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus congratulated the UK government, the University of Oxford, and the many hospitals and patients in the UK who have contributed to the breakthrough. Now, the steroid has been used since the 1960s to reduce inflammation in a range of conditions. The WHO added that the Oxford researchers have shared their initial insights with the agency, and it will look at the full data analysis in the coming days. Meanwhile, the British government said it would administer the drug to seriously ill COVID-19 patients effective immediately. Because it is cheap and readily available, the drug has the potential to be shipped to countries where medical aid is probably needed as well.
Right. Meanwhile, President Moon Jae-in has earned some praise from the UN for his response to COVID-19, I hear.
That's right. I mean, Korea and the President Moon Jae-in have been receiving a lot of praise recently, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has recently also sent a letter to President Moon praising Seoul's antivirus measures. Now, Guterres highlighted Korea's testing and contact tracing capabilities as a model for other countries. The UN chief also thanked Moon for showing great leadership during the pandemic. And he also welcomed Korea's so-called Green New Deal, stressing the need to revitalise the economy in a manner that doesn't harm the environment. Now, Moon's ambitious Green New Deal aims to achieve net zero emissions by the year 2050.
Right, Aram, thank you for that. We'll see you again on Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.
Now, we await now the government briefing on COVID-19. The government has decided to extend its rationing of face masks to the 11th of July to ensure that members of the public have adequate supplies amid the rising cases of infections in recent days. Now, initially, the rationing was to end on the 30th of this month, but officials have chosen to extend that period and to allow the purchase of 10 masks a week starting from tomorrow as opposed to 3. Now, for those of you who've already purchased 3 earlier this week, you can buy 7 more later this week. Health officials are emphasizing the importance of wearing face masks to reduce chances of contagion, as proven by recent research, including one that was backed by the World Health Organization. Also, given the rising cases of infections among senior citizens, health authorities are urging for stringent hygiene and quarantine practices at nursing homes and daycare centers. With regard to the presence of asymptomatic carriers, officials are calling on people to refrain from visiting places that are confined and congested and to wear a face mask at all times if such a visit is inevitable. Here is the briefing. We'll come back to you afterwards.
First, here is Director Chung Eun-kyung with the briefing. Let us now begin our briefing on the COVID-19 response here in South Korea. As of June 17th today, we have 31 transmissions locally, and we have 12 imported cases, and we have 43 cases today, and the total number of confirmed cases now stands at 12,198. 14 more people have fully recovered, and a total of 1,145 people are in quarantine undergoing treatment. Unfortunately, we had one more fatality as of yesterday. We extend our deepest condolences to the bereaved and the members of the bereaved families. And as for the local transmissions, here are some updates related to Ridgeway in Gwanak-gu District, Seoul City. We have 4 additional cases confirmed while under quarantine, and a total of 176 have been confirmed to date. 41 are visitors, and 135 of them are contacts. And in relation to the Seongsim Daycare Center in Dobong-gu District, Seoul, we have 12 additional cases being confirmed under contact management, and the total now stands at 33. Out of them, 24 are users, and 3 of them are staff and workers, and 7 are family and other contacts. And in Gyeonggi Icheon City, we have the Jail High School, and we also have one more additional confirmed case, and a total of 2 people have been confirmed to date. We are conducting the testings for the 1,280 people, and no single case of further confirmation have been confirmed. And we also have additional family who has been confirmed, and in relation to this, we have the Gyeonggi-do Bucheon at the daycare center, so 1 person working there and 1 family contact, and a total of 3 people have been confirmed, and we are conducting our diagnostic testing for the people who are at the daycare center. And in Bucheon City, we have one of the psychological centers. We have additional cases there, and we are conducting our epidemiological investigations. And in Daejeon Seoggu Galmadong District, we have 1 pastor, and a total of 4 people have been confirmed regarding a church, and we are conducting our contact tracings. And also in Daejeon, we have 11 new cases regarding a door-to-door sales business establishments. We are conducting epidemiological investigation. And as of today, midnight, we have 12 imported cases that have been confirmed, and the countries 4 were from America, and 8 were from Asia aside from China, and they included Pakistan, India, and Kazakhstan as well. And starting from May, since May, we have seen a cluster of infections in the senior citizens facilities, so we ask for special precautions. And as for the life treatment centers, we also found that most of these cluster infections were starting from the workers and caregivers who are working there and who were infected. And we also found that quarantine and disinfection for facilities and equipments like wheelchairs have not been fully kept. And also there were cases where the visitors as well as the families of the people who are at these facilities have been contracting the virus at first. And we also found that activities like eating together and singing and chanting, and these kind of activities have increased the risks of infection. So we ask the visitors and the workers there to be on special alert. And as if you are working at these facilities, if you have symptoms, please get tested as soon as possible. And please do not visit any multi-use facilities that are prone to high infections, including small religious group gatherings as well as club activities. And when you are working during these working hours, please wear your face masks and wash your hands thoroughly. And as for the users and the patients who are administered at these facilities, we ask you to get tested immediately if you have symptoms like fever or coughing and other respiratory symptoms. And as for the managers of these facilities, we ask you to disinfect the frequently touched areas and surfaces, including wheelchairs and doorknobs. And please refrain from engaging in activities that increase the travel of respiratory droplets, including chanting and singing. And please dine separately, and also while eating, please have distance each other so that you could prevent the spread of droplets. And also we advise you to comply strictly with quarantine measures. And recently we have found small religious group gatherings as well as door-to-door facilities in Daejeon City, which have seen an increase in the number of infections. And these facilities have high risk of infection due to high risk of travel of the respiratory droplets. So we advise these group meetings to be transformed to online meetings. And at the illegal and non-documented business establishments, we have found that they had gatherings and physical gatherings at venues that were poorly ventilated. So and they dined together, and also they had singing and chanting and other activities that increased the travel of respiratory droplets. So please take special care. And we would like to underscore the fact that COVID-19 outbreak can occur in any confined, crowded, and closed-door environment. Therefore, gatherings such as social club meetings and religious small group meetings should be postponed, and nightlife facilities and others should also be avoided.
예, 그럼 지금부터 기자님들 질의응답 받도록 하겠습니다. 역학조사가
Right, that was our Chung Eun-kyung, the head of KCDC, with Wednesday's afternoon briefing. So, what did she say? Do give us a summary.
Let's begin with the cluster infections in the capital, Seoul. There is a big concern related to the door-to-door businesses, now not only in Seoul, but also in other places of the country. Because, first off, when it comes to the Richway door-to-door facility in Seoul, that one has 4 more additional cases, bringing the total to 176. But now there's also been a case in the city of Daejeon, where 11 people were confirmed with COVID-19 in relation to a door-to-door business, which is why Tong stressed that these facilities have to be inspected, and they are being inspected, as we talked about before earlier in the show. And also she asked for nursing homes to take extra measures when it comes to quarantine due to a rise of elderly people getting infected since May.
All right, so thank you for that. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
COVID-19 has turned lives upside down across the globe, and while researchers work day and night to find a medical solution in the form of a vaccine or cure, renowned figures from the academia, for their part, are proposing an humanistic and sociological approach to the pandemic. We have more in this report.
The world has grappled with a crisis of extraordinary scale in the COVID-19 pandemic for nearly 6 months running. Renowned scholars from around the world have also weighed in with their analysis on the human and social repercussions of the pandemic. Michael Sandel is one of the world's leading minds in political philosophy. This is what he had to say on the important and effective role played by South Korean citizens in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Voluntary associations and responses from within civil society, independent of what the government has done. For example, landlords voluntarily reducing rent for businesses, small businesses, for shops, and for residents. That's something that is very impressive. And that, to someone looking on from the US, I greatly admire. You don't see a lot of that here.
Many South Korean citizens voluntarily set aside some of their individual freedoms for the benefit of the common good. However, this has also led to concerns over possible violations in the people's right to privacy.
If the location data can be effectively anonymized, then we can get the benefit for public health, notify the people who may have come into contact without revealing the identity of the person. But if it's possible pretty easily to figure out the identity of the people, then I think there is a serious privacy concern. And keep that sense of violation close to our consciousness so that when the crisis recedes, we can reassert and enforce the values of privacy that we are temporarily willing to suspend to some degree.
Despite efforts to prioritize the common good above individual interests, a climate of fear in the face of this unprecedented crisis has led to a free-for-all mentality among many people, with issues such as hoarding and xenophobic sentiments bubbling to the surface amid the pandemic. Dr. Jacques Attali, a French economist and futurologist, underscored the value of compassion and altruism to prevent the breakdown in social order.
On le voit, ce qui se passe quand je porte un masque. Quand je porte un masque, je protège les autres, et les autres, en portant un masque, me protègent moi. Donc chacun a intérêt à ce que les autres protègent les autres pour me protéger moi. C'est ce que j'appelle l'altruisme intéressé. J'ai intérêt à être altruiste.
The task is now upon the current generation to build a brighter future for mankind in the post-pandemic era.
De prévoir les risques et de s'y préparer. Il faut prévoir les risques de pandémie, les risques climatiques, les risques géopolitiques et s'y préparer. Donc la prévision de l'avenir est très importante. C'est ce que j'appelle l'altruisme à l'égard des générations futures. Nous avons intérêt à être altruistes à l'égard des générations futures parce que ce sont les générations futures qui créent les conditions de notre propre vie. Si on est altruiste à l'égard des générations futures, comme on est altruiste à l'égard de ses propres enfants et petits-enfants, on fait le mieux possible.
New Zealand marked an end to 24 days of no COVID-19 infections on Tuesday after confirming 2 imported cases. For more on the situation there, I have Professor Michael Baker from Otago University, an epidemiologist who also advises the government on its COVID-19 response. Welcome to the program, Professor Baker.
Good evening, great to be here.
Professor, earlier last week, New Zealand announced that it was free of COVID-19. Could you tell us a bit more about the background leading up to that announcement?
Yes, well, I think countries all around the world were facing this pandemic and rolling out our pandemic influenza plans. But by early March, it was very clear to me, and I think a number of other people, that this was more like a SARS virus. And so we really looked to Asia for leadership, including Korea, in terms of how to respond to this. So we took an elimination approach, which has been successful.
Professor Baker, as I previously mentioned, yesterday, that is June 16th, New Zealand recorded 2 new cases of COVID-19. Now, this comes amid the lifting of almost all restrictions in the country. Do you expect a change in this eased stance?
No, I don't think so. Basically, these were 2 people who were released early from a quarantine facility and were actually quite carefully monitored. So I think they're very unlikely to have infected other people. But there's now a huge contact tracing exercise underway as a precaution. So I don't think there is any community transmission in New Zealand. But this is a huge reminder to New Zealand that we really have to manage this disease very carefully.
Professor Baker, the world is facing grim prospects of a second wave of COVID-19 infections. What, in your view, are the chances of such a global resurgence, and how is New Zealand preparing for such a scenario?
Yeah, I agree. I think across much of the world, this second wave is a really terrible problem. And particularly if we see in parts of North America, as they come out of lockdown, they've still got so much virus circulating in the community that they're going to see an intense outbreak and then a huge exponential rise in cases. So I think that's quite grim for many countries. It's different in New Zealand because we think we have no community transmission at this stage. So we would not expect to see any outbreak. as long as that situation is maintained. And at the moment, the benefit, as you know, in Korea, of pursuing elimination is that you can return to normal life after that. And we know that countries do face setbacks. I know Korea's had a setback, China's had a setback, Singapore, and New Zealand in a small way has also had a setback. But I think the overall goal is still very sound.
Professor Baker, in your opinion, how can Korea seek to overcome its current setback?
Well, I think you're a world leader in testing and contact tracing, and I think continuing with those measures. The other thing is that we're very impressed with the use of face masks across Asia, and that also appears to be a very valuable strategy, and I think we could learn more from Asia in that regard.
All right, Professor Baker, thank you very much for joining us live at this hour to share your thoughts.
Thank you.
Pyongyang's destruction of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office located within its border town of Kaesong is heightening tensions on the peninsula and adding to a list of concerns for Seoul, where officials are seeking to tackle the fallout from COVID-19 and now the cross-border affairs. For more on the extensive repercussions of the situation amid the pandemic on the global economy, I have Professor Yang Hee-dong from Ewha Women's University in the studio. Welcome, Professor Yang.
Hi, see you.
And I also have Professor Oh Jun-seok from Sookmyang Women's University. Welcome to the program, Professor Oh.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Oh, we'll start with you. Are we seeing any reactions in the global financial markets to North Korea's latest act of defiance?
Yesterday, North Korea destroyed the Inter-Korean Liaison Office in Kaesong. It's a loud explosion and the gulping smoke coming from the Kaesong industrial complex. It means a lot to the global investors, not to mention the global community. Symbolically, the office was a gesture of open policy of the North Korea. And then diplomatically, it also shows a willingness to accommodate international investment. It might be considered as a kind of self-injury, but by escalating tension and then cutting all communications with outer world, amplifies uncertainty not only to the limited to the Korean economy, but with Japan, China, Russia, and even the United States. What about the financial market? The international investors hate this kind of uncertainty, but most investors may have expected rationally from their experience, which means that Korean KOSPI and then KOSDAQ moves a bit down, but not that much. What is worried at this point is not the attack yesterday, but the next step, which is hidden after the blowing up. Might be the second attack will be very, very vulnerable to the financial market, not of Korea, but the global financial market will be very, very, vulnerable.
I see. Why would you say that? Why would the second possible?
Because the second attack might be totally different from the first attack. It's a kind of gesture or it's kind of just a sending sign. But the second attack will move the market in reality, I suppose.
Professor Yang, South Korean stock markets have historically been undervalued due to what analysts are calling the Korean discount, which factors in the risk, the geopolitical risk elements due to North Korea. What is the actual impact of these elements on Korea's economic prospects or its financial markets?
Well, everyone knows that Korea is now on the big handicap due to the potential risks from North Korea. But I'm afraid that a lot of people, including the U.S. and Korea, are well accustomed to this kind of risks. So, for example, yesterday we had an unexpected explosion in for the liaison office. But in the very next day, today, we have a very handsome, the bounce back of the KOSPI back to the normal the index. So that well reflects that how well we are well accustomed to this kind of very steady and very archaic, the threats of North Korea. The more serious problem in this peninsula and in Korea is rather the internal aspects of Korean governance and Korean economic activities, including the coronavirus. So I should say that yes, we still have a potential threat and risk from North Korea, but that risk is not that much horrible as we may assume.
Professor Oh, South Korea's growth forecast for this year had been expected to outpace that of its peers despite COVID-19. Do you expect a change in this outlook?
The question is something like asking me, are you a person see the glass half full or half empty? Yesterday, I saw the film on TV, and then I came to remember a lyric of a fight song. Like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion. Yesterday's blowing up the office is like a big dump. Huge stone dumped into the ocean next to the small boat. It's so sad to have a poor neighbor, bad neighbor. Let's make it simple. Two pillars of the global economy is a consumption-oriented economy, and the other one is a production-oriented economy. And then what is more important is make those two economies interacted and then circulate. That is the main role of the Korea in terms of international trade. But that global lockdown make it separate, and then that makes Korea in trouble. Just aftermath of COVID-19, market power in Korea is a small economy by itself, can easily restore to its normal position well. So this is why government take an action, not monetary action, but fiscal action as a helping hand, effective and then right timing of government intervention is needed at this moment. And then it is a right time government intervene in the market, and it holds good. But till now, Korean government just managed to handle the COVID-19 outbreak in terms of economy. But that yesterday is blowing up. It also another dust and then smoke in the sky of Korean economy, which might be ill effect against the future of Korean economy, I might say.
Right, a lot of dust and cloud in the Korean economy, of course, which is why the South Korean government, Professor Yang, held an emergency meeting yesterday and said it was preparing measures to minimize the economic fallout from this latest act of provocation. There were no details exchanged, though. What, in your opinion, might these measures include?
Well, immediately after the explosion, the Korean government announced they will stop the delivery and the provision of electricity to gas and industrial complex. So that well implies that the Korean government may well aware of some constraint over the measures against this kind of unexpected behavior by North Korea. Well, personally, I don't think the Korean government considers very significant any containment, the measures against North Korea, because there are too many external forces around the Korean peninsula. Japan and the US and China, all of them may have different ideas and plans for the future development and progress of the Korean peninsula, situations. So, again, and we may remember the announcement by the Blue House that the summit plan is still effective. So, in one hand, they may prepare for some gestures to express their uncomfortableness against this kind of explosion. But on the other hand, they may well prepare for the future, the very peaceful, the summit between North and South Korea.
And along with these attempts, Professor Oh, we are facing very likely the tangible possibility of a second wave of COVID-19. Now, initially, the OECD had expected the global economy to shrink by 6% in light of COVID-19. Do you expect this figure to worsen if there is a second wave?
Unfortunately, I might say yes. And then today, International Monetary Fund, the IMF, also disclosed a gloomy forecast today, a minus growth of the world economy. It might be true that the second pandemic wave will make it worse in and out of the economy. Already one and two and down hit hard. And then what about the Eurozone area? Global shutdown made tourism and then tour-related service industry like aviation and then transportation, hotel, restaurant business all disappear. A great lockdown will be prone to wake up a great depression. And then what about trade war between China and the US became serious more and more. And it will increase another uncertainty around the world, and then it may shrink the international trade and then international investment as well. What about ASEAN countries? ASEAN countries battles global supply chain due to COVID-19 into chaos already. As a result, first wave of COVID-19 continues, and then as a rippling effect of a second wave of COVID-19, it will increase the unemployment rate higher accordingly, regardless of developing countries or advanced countries, which means that the disappear of the market, global market. And then this kind of shock to real economy will be widened eventually into the financial shock, as likely as which has happened in the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, and speaking about financial crisis, Professor Yang, looming fears over a second wave, of course, are rattling financial markets as well. I mean, here in Korea, if my figures are correct, more than $70 billion worth of shares were wiped out of the Kospi on Monday alone. What is your assessment of the financial markets right now?
Well, I mean, we had some kind of very unexpected, I should say, scandal, right, on last Monday. Because last weekend we have a abrupt drop of the stock price in U.S. I think the Monday's, the sudden drop was well affected by the situations in U.S. But on the very next day we have very successful recovery, right, back to the normal status. So I should say that, well, the North Korea, again, does not bring any significant impact on Korean financial status or stock markets. So we may well consider more significant other factors, including the COVID-19 or the global economic recovery, and et cetera. So, for example, the U.S. is well preparing for the emergency budget to help recover of the economic disasters, and their temporary budget almost amounts to $2.4 trillion, and they're preparing another $2 trillion for the remaining of this year. And European Commission has declared that they will prepare 2.4 trillion euros, right, for quite a long time, since 2021 through 2027, to help recovery of the economic disaster. So the U.S. has prepared almost 11.1% for this kind of emergency budget out of their regular budgets, which is very similar to the Korean government case. So every country is well prepared for this kind of emergency by preparing extra budget, right, to help recover the economic disasters. Well, the only problem may be China, because they have prepared a very relatively smaller amount of budget to help, the exit from this economic disaster, because their extra budget is just, which is 2.5% of their regular budget. So, there is no any global, central tower to coordinate all these kind of extra budgets to help recover the economic disaster. But every country should work very hard, right, and to coordinate all the individual efforts to recover from this unexpected, the disaster.
Staying with that, Professor Yang, the government here recently proposed a third extra budget, and there was debate about those who claimed that it was necessary and others who claimed that the budget would undermine Korea's fiscal health. Where do you stand on this debate?
Well, I will take the side of the supporting this, the reserve, the supplementary budget, because our fiscal soundness is pretty handsome. The fiscal soundness is defined as the national debt over the GDP, and the national debt over GDP, it just reaches about the 40%, which is almost less than half of OECD average, which is about 109%. So I think we should have enough capacity to prepare for this kind of special reserve supplementary budget to boost up the economic activities due to this unexpected disaster. And the current government, last month announced that they are going to use this special budget to support a new deal plan, right, with a more focus on digitalization and green industry, et cetera, and welfare as well. And this special plan, I think, is very, very helpful, because there are two major factors that may help our country or government to have successfully maintain this unexpected disaster. The first one is CDC has well prepared, to constrain this kind of disaster, health disaster. And the second factor is the Korean government has been very successful to provide right amount of the budget, as Professor Oh mentioned, on the right occasions. So those are two major factors that have created synergy effect, that have maintained very handsome economic treatment, amid this kind of expected disaster.
And Professor Oh, what are your thoughts about Korea's version of the New Deal?
New Deal. Yeah. Let's make it simply speaking, I could understand that fiscal expansion drive policy, and that also I could understand that it contains the risk of widening budget deficit. Today's burning money is a long-lasting burden in the future. Under liquidity trap situation, where the monetary policy like interest rate drop or money supply increase are not effective anymore, no argument under this kind of emergency system, government debt level, whether it is less than 40% of GDP, as Professor Yang commented, is operative or not, that does not matter. Korean government have no other no other option at this moment to choose other than the government expenditure increase or the tax increase at this moment. I could add two things to comment regarding the Korean New Deal. First, government expenditure is just a necessary condition, not sufficient condition to get away from this kind of liquidity trap. To be sufficient, including global investors, promotion of investment into Korea is needed. How to promote international investment into Korea? We have to develop a profitable project and then make a condition, investment condition, more friendly to the international investment. And then second, that increasing budget deficit is not a matter of capacity to hold the burden of the debt, but it is a matter of speed of adjustment to rebalancing Korean economy, to keep the balance back to the Korean economy, pay more attention to and regulate the speed of expanding budget deficit, I must say.
I see. Professor Yang, in your opinion, apart from the extra budget and the Green Deal that the government has proposed, what other measures do you think are necessary to weather a second wave amid worsening geopolitical tensions on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, first of all, we need to be really, really careful about the respreading of this virus, because as you may well aware of the long-time experience of the Spain flu that occurred in 1918. There were 3 different waves of Spain flu, and the very critical damage had occurred in the second wave. Because the second wave, the death rate almost skyrocketed up to 60%, whereas the first round had only like 5 or 6% of the death, which is very similar to the current status of the coronavirus. Third wave almost reached to 35%. So that means what? In the second or third wave, we could have more critical death rate. So that's why we should be more careful and more meticulous about preparing for this hygiene, the issues in our everyday life. So I should put more emphasis on our everyday daily life in terms of the hygiene, preparations for every aspect of their life. That should be the primary concern.
What about you, Professor Oh? What final words would you add to ensure that Korea is better prepared for a second wave?
In short, the top priority is investment promotion is needed in the transition period from New Deal to next normal. But for the same sense, top priority of risk to prepare is a sudden stop. Sudden stop is a financial terminology, which means rapid capital flight of international investor out of Korea. It is very vulnerable to the Korean capital market. So at this moment, that if it stagnates, I mean that COVID-19 stagnates longer, it might be likely financial crisis as of 2008 might be very imminent. So we have to prepare for the kind of measures and then kind of the processes to prepare for that.
Right, yeah. Professor Oh, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Professor Yang, as always, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
어느 곳곳에 있는 요소에 있는 분들이 힘을 합치니까 이 코로나는 우리 코리아를 이길 수 없을 것 같다는 생각을 갖기도 했어요. 그리고 우리는 반드시 잘 해냈고 더 잘 해낼 거라고 기대하고 있고요.
And on that note, we end Wednesday's edition of COVID-19. Be sure to join us again tomorrow, which is Thursday, as we take a look at the quarantine measures aimed at warding off a second wave amid the expected heat wave this summer here in this part of the world. In the meantime, do share your thoughts and inquiries with us through our social media accounts or our homepage, arirang.com. Thank you for watching.